Greetings, fellow followers. That is my greeting. So, this new episode of Thoughtful Thursdays. Today we will be talking about another Project Itoh's project called Empire of Corpses. And this was done prior to Harmony, which we discussed last episode.
And, this is actually a very interesting work. It is the predecessor of Harmony. So, it's actually, out of all of his stuff, it's considered to be the most accessible. It's a lot easier to flow into. But it's still got a lot of wonderful stuff that you can take from it as well. And, just to introduce everybody, once again, our delivery man right here. And I am Fearless Billy Nwanda. And, of course, right here, this is House Cat and Superdog.
Superdog.
Yes. So let's kind of dig right on into it. Empire of Corpses, Victorian era, steampunk set and style anime.
Yes. Which is exotic. It's different. It's not usually done in anime. To me, this is the first time that I see a truly steampunk anime. Normally, you see anime that is focused more either on the future, very much the future, like 2,000 years in the future, or very much in the past, like thousands of years in the past.
Yeah, like as far as Victorian era, you really don't see that animated often, much less like the steampunk kind of aesthetic. Mm-hmm. There have been a few titles that have tackled it in the past, but really it's kind of something that is a rarity in anime in general, and manga as well. Seeing something like Empire of Corpses is kind of refreshing to a great extent. And again, I think it's because it was that refreshingness is what put Project Itoh on the map. And gave him the freedom to make Harmony and later Genocidal Organ. Mm-hmm. So,
which is coming out this month, right?
Yeah, it's going to be out in U.S. theaters in July.
Yeah,
I believe mid-July, if I remember correctly.
So, and I can't wait for that, and I'm hoping to see it dubbed because I really like this guy. This is one of the guys that I have been thoroughly impressed with, just because his material is extraordinarily smart and very well put together, very coherent. And what I liked about Empire of Corpses is that not only does he use, as you said, a steampunk aesthetic, he uses literature figures as his characters. And it reminds me a lot of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, it does kind of have you don't notice it as much when you're watching the film, but when you go back later on and you check the wiki and you see which each character is actually modeled after, it really does give that League of Extraordinary Gentlemen vibe to it. And also it kind of contributes to the again, the accessibility of it, and the fact that he's using a lot of historical fictional characters and just historical characters in general. Mm-hmm. It kind of like it's a giant Otherworlds style story, if that makes sense. So, again, that's really nice. It's kind of a nice take on things. I was kind of really impressed with kind of a lot of the callbacks to a lot of popular reanimated or corpse style films that have taken place over the years. It's it's kind of even got a blink and you miss it bit with the Frankenstein's monster from the original Universal film. Mm-hmm. And I do kind of think that it shares a lot of kindred spirits with a lot of those kind of, not necessarily like zombie tales, but tales of reanimation. The obvious one is like Frankenstein, because that's kind of the whole basis of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But another like really popular series that deals with reanimated corpses and like a lot of the morals and a lot of the conflicts that come with that is actually the 80s series of cult B-movie films, Reanimator, which came out, which deals very heavily in that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Itoh took a couple notes from that as well.
Yeah, that's right, because he takes a little bit of everything for these characters. And speaking of things that or patterns that we see, themes that we see with the message in the show, in the movie, we see this idea of the obsession of bringing back a loved one, right? Which we see in Full Metal Alchemist, which is another huge hit, and how, just as in Full Metal Alchemist, bringing back someone who has passed away is a taboo.
Yeah, it's in life in general, like human nature and culture, the ultimate, like one of the ultimate goals is to achieve like immortality, to make it to where like we are not able to perish, that we can continue living on. And then, one of the major taboos of that though is how do you accomplish that? And there are a lot of really interesting questions going on with like the Human Genome Project, with manipulation of stem cells, things of that nature, which are ways that we can progress and we can actually control it. Again, we're approaching a harmony-like situation here in the in our developing world here pretty soon, where we're going to be actually able to eliminate a lot of stuff. But the problem is, though, is how does that clash with a lot of the moral and religious sects where that kind of stuff is very much forbidden, you know? So, yeah, I mean, Empire of Corpses raises a lot of really good questions about that.
I got the feeling, both in Harmony and Empire of Corpses, both movies show a very grim, very somber attitude towards humanity itself, as a race, as how it doesn't matter how much progress we make, it doesn't matter how advanced our technology is, we still are dominated by our instincts and in the end our savagery. Although even though that is a message that is very obvious and very clear throughout the movie, I think Satoshi Itoh has a more positive attitude towards it. I think even though that could be an attitude, and it goes along with the characters in the Empire of Corpses, which are somewhat of the protagonists. They're part of the movie. They're based on Dostoevsky's novel Brothers Karamazov, and or Karamazov. It doesn't it depends who you're asking. But that novel is one of the greatest novels ever written in terms of Russian literature, according to critics. And this was a work of literature that Dostoevsky, who is arguably the creator of the philosophical movement called Existentialism, which later Nietzsche followed. And in this philosophical movement, you see this attitude. Existentialism is about pretty much the phrase that Nietzsche made famous: "God is dead." And in the brothers Karamazov, the hero deals with this question. And in this novel, like in Empire of Corpses, where Watson pushes aside the idea of God, because in a world with such savagery, why would I be a part of this world if God created it? So if that is the case, then I'd rather follow pure reason and intelligence and data, which is reflected in the punch cards.
Yeah, I mean, in the world that's depicted in Empire of Corpses, because they've already essentially achieved, like, in a very bleak way, the immortality that humanity has been seeking, and through the corpseware tech. So it's already kind of a situation where, they use the corpses to, do their, like, everyday life stuff. So it's kind of a situation where folks are, like, already kind of in a state of, we get to party as much as in life, and then when we technically die, that's when we just go into our servitude. Because, with corpses, they don't really, like, it's established very early on that corpses don't have a soul or consciousness. Mm-hmm. Instead, they have to function off of programming that's, woven through a little implant that's implanted into the spinal cord that goes straight into the cerebellum. So, with that in mind, you don't really, there's not, like, the one thing that Empire of Corpses really lacks is the religious aspect of it. Mm-hmm. Mainly because, it's kind of hard to maintain faith when your faith is going to be shattered, because thanks to this new tech, the dead walk amongst the living again. Even if they're just being either soldiers or, handymen or anything like that of that sort.
Right. Like in the movie, we see sailors, cooks that do, simple tasks. We see fodder, cannon fodder in wars, in the battles that the great powers, which in this case would be Great Britain, a very nascent United States, and Russia, which I think Itoh cleverly uses well, like very, very cleverly used as a historical background to the story. What I like about this movie, like Harmony, is that it asks questions. It doesn't offer you the answer. It doesn't tell you, okay, this is the answer to this question. It poses the question so you can ask yourself, and you yourself as a viewer can come to your own conclusion, or maybe to even dig a little bit into the subject. Like, for example, the characters. Hadley, which is the heroine, Dr. Watson, which is, the hero, the other characters that help along these characters, the brothers Karamazov, and Burnaby, which is the basis for... He was a real-life admiral, or was he admiral? He was in
yeah, I believe he served in the Navy.
He served in the Navy, and so he served the English crown, and he's the basis for 007 in the novels.
Well, you're talking about... Are you talking about M?
Oh, M is...
M is the 007 basis.
Okay.
And then the character Barnaby is actually based off the real-life Barnaby, who was an admiral in the Navy. He was kind of known as an adventurer. He traveled a lot by balloon. He was kind of the swashbuckler. That's kind of what allows Empire of Corpses to use him to drive the plot, because a lot of them having to get around involves having to deal with situations that get through corpse armies and get through assassins and whatnot. So Barnaby exists in this movie to help drive things forward. Because Watson by himself is incapable of doing so with Friday, nor can Hadley really do anything, because she spends a good, almost half the film kind of in the shadows. She really doesn't come into the picture until like halfway through.
Yeah.
So you need somebody to get things going, and that's where Barnaby's role is in this one. But yeah, like all of the characters, like, and again, as we should probably forewarn, with every Thoughtful Thursday, there's spoilers!
Mm-hmm.
So keep this in mind. But all of the characters in Empire of Corpses are actually based off of, either historical characters or fictional historical characters. Again, I think this is a really brilliant ploy by Itoh to make this work pretty accessible.
Yeah.
By doing that, because it's a lot easier if you feel at home knowing that this is pretty much Watson from the Sherlock Holmes novels, or that Friday is in actuality the noble savage from Robinson Crusoe.
Mm-hmm.
So, by having that familiarity and then seeing them being thrown into these extraordinary circumstances, it really helps to drive home like the wonder of the story. One of the interesting touches I thought with too was that when it came to the One, who is essentially the nameless original creation of Frankenstein, that they actually went with more of a traditional human design instead of going for the obvious cop-out of either something that was extraordinarily deformed like in recent movies, or again like the old Universal Studios template.
Right, exactly. And what I thought was interesting is that the monster that is shown with more of a human face is actually older too.
Yeah, like he's actually lived for 100 years by the time of the story at this point. So he has a really high level, and he displays a very high level of intelligence, a high level of cunning. He basically plays all of the characters like a fiddle over the course of the movie, and it's really by happenstance and by luck that he is defeated at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It was really kind of amazing, and like it was actually, I think, a really clever way of doing the Bride of Frankenstein bit as well.
Yeah,
because if you notice, like towards the end of the movie, you find out that Home Slice has been manipulating all the characters and all the pieces into play so that A, he can give himself a younger body, and B, so that he can pull all of the souls together to create essentially a brand new soul to put into Hadley so he has his bride.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a really interesting take on that. Something else I kind of noticed too is like the very vibrant usage towards the end of the color green. If you noticed, for a lot of folks who are into a lot of like horror movies, especially like a lot of B-horror movies, when it comes to reanimation or when it comes to zombies, corpses in general, the color green, neon green, is used quite a bit, and it kind of represents toxicity, danger, stay away.
Right.
And if you notice, like a lot of the corpses don't really give off this kind of vibe, or any of that color really wasn't displayed until M and the others started making their play. Like the EMP signal was a green EMP signal.
Huh.
So it was just kind of like, that's when you started, that was kind of the first visual sign that you knew that things were about to go sour.
Mm-hmm.
It is a green EMP signal, which transmitted a toxic signal to all the corpses and caused them to revolt against their masters.
That's a very good point. I didn't notice it, but that's exactly right. That's when the shit hits the fan, and like you said, they start revolting. Another brilliant move from Itoh, which I don't think was an accident whatsoever, is precisely the characters that he uses when he does use them. For example, Dr. Watson is, as we mentioned earlier, from Sherlock Holmes. So it's my understanding that actually Dr. Watson is the insert by the creators, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, of Sherlock Holmes, because Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a doctor himself, and the cunning and the deduction abilities of Sherlock Holmes is something that is used in terms of medicine. That's how you approach, or that before technological advancements came about, that's how you approached a sickness. So Watson is a doctor in the same way Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is a doctor. And so you could say that Sherlock Holmes is his alter ego, whereas Dr. Watson is himself, is a part of himself.
Yeah, usually a lot of writers tend to bury their, like, a lot of times their main characters are really slices of their own self. Like, even with Itoh, you could even say that, like, because, like, he chose Watson because Watson functions in this film as kind of like the one who is trying to rebel against death.
Mm-hmm.
But also trying to rebel against the system of death and, like, you know, trying to create something new.
Mm-hmm.
And you could even go back and, like, you know, see that in harmony with, you know, Tuon's, you know, gal pal, who started the suicide pacts and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And that she's trying to, you know, essentially conquer life.
Mm-hmm.
And conquer a system, you know, that is just not worth it living it through anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of these characters that Itoh uses, and again, we haven't seen Genocidal Organ yet, so we don't know if this trend continues.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of his characters tend to be like those who are trying to kind of fight back. They're his voice of fighting back against a cultural system, because again, you know, Empire of Corpses, you can make the same comparison with Harmony that we did last week, in that it's based a lot off of a super conforming Japanese society that tends to always prefer to walk in place.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Itoh's main characters tend to be the characters that scream "I" at the heart of the beast.
Mm-hmm. And that is something interesting that I noticed from both movies. I think Empire of Corpses is a broader approach to his thoughts, whereas Harmony is much more honed in, and he's really talking about Japan and Japanese society, whereas Empire of Corpses, it's a more universal.
Yeah, Empire of Corpses is basically like the really popular style book and movie that gets your foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Japanese creators, authors, mangaka, anime directors tend to do that quite a bit. Their first work is always a work that is just designed to, like, it has a little bit of bits in there, but it's mainly to get your foot in the door, gives you a little bit of a taste. It's the appetizer, and then their next work becomes the main course. So yeah, this way, like, Empire of Corpses is like, it's kind of like a swashbuckling adventure movie that has a lot of really good bits that you can take out of it. Whereas Harmony isn't as much there for the adventure aspect.
No.
It's much more about the internal struggle.
Yes.
So
Definitely.
Yeah.
What I noticed is that Watson is the representation of pure reason, and Hadley is the opposite. It would be what might be the complementary, which is emotion, because Hadley is based off a novel by a French author called Auguste Valliere, and so it's called The Future Eve, and that's where a historical figure, which is fictionalized Edison, Thomas Edison, creates an android. And from what I understand, his novel was the first novel that actually popularized the term android.
Mm-hmm.
What I thought was interesting is that in the movie, the dub version, they use the term automaton.
Yeah, very true. And, another interesting callback, too, is that if you really look at her design, it definitely harkens back to Galaxy Express 999, that whole movie series, with the android that was there to act as the guide for the main character.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's kind of an interesting parallel to Leiji Matsumoto's work.
So that's right. I mean, it's just amazing the layers and layers and layers that his work in general has.
Yeah. Then again, that's kind of why we're here. We're picking this apart for you. So
that's right.
So that you can be like, oh yeah, I call that too, bro.
Yeah. And maybe we can convince you to watch it yourself, and then you will find something that we missed.
Yeah. But yeah, like it's like I said, there's so many. Again, there's layers to peel aside. I mean, one of the other things that really always strikes me, again, is the concept of individuality and free will versus conformity. Because if you kind of notice, like, towards the end of the film, it's like a double entendre of antagonism. Like M's whole plot the whole time is to essentially force everybody into becoming corpses, so that he can essentially ensure a world free of war and suffering. Because and it's very much similar to the whole situation with Harmony being activated.
Yeah,
is that you have some folks that are like deeply afraid of mankind's inner urges. And so instead, they want to activate a system that will force everybody to conform to the same way.
Mm-hmm. And I think this movie is a little more, a little less. It has less of a positive outlook, because in the Empire of Corpses, people are forced into a void because they can't feel really anything. So as much as they don't feel rage and this feeling of murderous intent, they don't feel happiness either.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Harmony, there's a flatness of happiness.
Yeah. I would say, like, at the end of the day, the outcome is a little bit more positive than Harmony's is. But there is, like, throughout the film, again, there's a feeling of dread that's kind of, like, creeping along. Like, you as a viewer, you know that. And again, for a lot of people, this is their moral, possibly a lot of their religious sides coming in and kicking in, just being like, this doesn't really seem right. That these folks are animating all these corpses up, and just using them to do the backbone of all the labor. Because then you create, like, you create a WALL-E situation, know? Because you remember with WALL-E, humanity built all these robots to do all the work, and humanity got really greedy and then fat and then floated up to the stars in that movie. So I'm kind of surprised that and of course, again, with Empire Corpses, they really wanted to keep it more, for the movie anyway, they wanted to keep it more focused on the action and on the adventure part of it, kind of the Indiana Jones aspect of the film. That's kind of what Empire Corpses really has through a lot of it, is that it kind of reminds me of Raiders a lot, too, in that respect. And that, you have this journey for, an artifact, in this case, Victor Frankenstein's notes, that can change life and death.
Right.
and it's their kind of swashbuckling adventure around it, trying to find it. So yeah, that was a pretty interesting, because of that swashbuckling adventure, you don't get too much of the bleakness you should be feeling, but it is lying under there as an undercurrent.
Yeah. Throughout the movie, you don't see many smiles, if you notice.
You really don't. There's it's kind of one of those deals where it's an adventure, but the only one that's actually having the adventure is Barnaby.
Yeah, that's right.
Which again, but he's there he functions as the driver of the plot forward. So while you got Watson and, looking constantly morose because, he's in this for very ulterior motives. You got Barnaby who's just having a fun old time because he's getting to beat the crap out of dead bodies all the movie.
That's right.
So, yeah, I did kind of notice that. There was not a whole lot of happiness going around until near the end.
Yeah.
Even then, for Watson, there still wasn't a true means of finding peace. You don't get that sense of peace in the movie.
Right.
Me and the delivery man here actually kept trying to watch thing and hoping there was a post-credit sequence. Because the movie ends on just him, sticking his own, program into himself to program himself into a corpse. But you don't know what happened to him. And we found out that in the book, that he reprogrammed himself into the companion Dr. Watson for Sherlock Holmes. And you find out that he managed somehow to fully resurrect Friday. So Friday and Hadley are keeping watch over him along with Barnaby. So, yeah. Would have been nice to get that ending, but at the same token, one of Japan's big deals is they like the sort of ultra open-ended ending, along with my particular favorites, the bleak ending where nobody ends up really happy and a few people die, and as well as the main protagonist saves the world but loses everything dear to him in the process, and then he wanders around the world forevermore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Aimlessly.
Yeah, it has to be aimlessly. And he's probably going to have a really long, cloak or, rags and robes and stuff.
That's right.
So you can barely recognize that it's him.
Yeah. His face is covered somehow.
His face is covered for the most part, and, they find him in the desert, and... yeah, at this point, we've digressed a little bit.
Yeah. But something that I am starting to enjoy more and more, and I think it's more because of Ito's brilliance, is shows or movies that are there for you to ask questions and not to reach conclusions. Not to have a nice, tidy ending with, a nice bow, red bow, packaged in this, white box, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's with Ito's work, it's not stuff that's it's left open-ended, but even with Empire Corpses, we didn't have this feeling of open-endedness of
well, that sucked.
Well, that sucked, kind of open-endedness. It was more along the lines of it felt like a complete experience.
Yeah.
And it left us just enough to get us thinking. Which is kind of what you want to do when you're going to do those open-ended conclusions.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to make it to where it's so open-ended to where it just feels like it wasn't even worth watching.
Right.
So...
And something that I think is equally brilliant from Ito is that a genius, I would say, is that each main character poses a question in and of itself. So Watson, his question is, there's a couple of questions. For instance, the first one I would say is, the first question that he poses is it really a taboo when it's after it's normalized, does it have to be a taboo? For example, technology. The technology that we use nowadays, once upon a time, was frowned upon. It wasn't something that people would think of being necessary in life until we started using it and implemented it into our daily lives. And we were talking about apps and how I myself am somewhat cynical about what technology does to society in general, but at the same time, as a visually impaired person, my life wouldn't be as complete or as fulfilling or as useful if it weren't for technology.
Yeah, very true. Watson kind of posed the question of, what is taboo anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what is the true nature of the soul? The 21 grams.
Right.
And with, Hadley, it's kind of more along the lines of, what do I need to do to feel complete?
Yes, exactly. So if having a soul is having 21 grams, then what is the difference between me showing that I can care? If I've been told that someone who does not care doesn't have a soul, and then you show signs of caring, where does the soul begin and when does it end? Because throughout the show, Hadley is worried about Watson.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. I mean, the way that her character is written is that it's almost as if she does have a soul.
Mm-hmm.
Now they try to use the automaton excuse, because I think it works as a plot device to connect to the Bride of Frankenstein bit.
Yeah, right.
But to be honest, maybe it comes off more in the book, but yeah, you really are left with more questions about Hadley, because if you think being an automaton, she would probably conduct herself in more of a,
truly robotic.
Yeah, or a detached manner.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to Rei Ayanami from Evangelion. Goodness, what's her name from Big O?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. The lady with the short hair.
Yeah. Also, guys, we're very horrible with names.
Yeah, horrible. Horrible. But you can correct us, comment, like and subscribe. Yes. But, no, one of the phrases that is used a lot by Hadley is that I can't shed tears. And that is her way of saying I don't have a soul, because if I had a soul, I could shed tears. But that's not necessarily true. For example, Friday, which is a reference, as we said, to the noble savage, which is the indigenous person that Robinson Crusoe befriends when he is in this island. It goes into a little bit of ethnocentricity, politics, and because the criticism of Robinson Crusoe is who is the United Kingdom or the United States or Russia to tell other countries what is the right way of living.
Mm-hmm. Very much so, and that was the Victorian era, especially the late Victorian era, was the beginning of a very tumultuous period for the world, because you had Russia, which had amassed itself as an early superpower then under the royal family, the Tsars. Mm-hmm. You had America, which was coming up, just recovering from the Civil War, and now they were starting on their way through. And, Europe was still under primarily the sway of the United Kingdom, because the UK had its hands all over the world at this point, because of the concept of the British Empire. Mm-hmm. So you had these three forces already in the late 1800s that were starting to make a strong push to see who was going to be the top dog.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, during the day, it was hands down. The UK was still the main superpower, which they didn't really cede over until after World War II.
That's right.
In that case, which in this case, the U.S. kind of took over from that point, like late 40s and through the 50s and so on and so forth.
That's right.
So yeah, like you had these three parties that were all already trying to convince, no, this is the way you do things.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way you live your life.
Yeah.
And
this is the food you eat. This is the clothes you wear.
Yep.
This is the way you behave.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's kind of interesting seeing characters like Watson and Hadley. Like in this case, unlike Harmony, which is pretty much a two sides of the coin kind of affair,
right?
You had a much more varied cast that could express many more different points of view,
right?
Of course, Barnaby being the kind of bash in the door and get your friend shot in the ass kind of point of view.
Yeah.
But he also acts as kind of the moral compass of the group.
Yeah.
If you notice.
Yeah.
He's the one that gets Dr. Watson back to his senses and actually, forces him to realize, oh, goodness, I screwed up.
Because what is interesting, the question that the Karamazov brothers raise is the question about a little bit of the existence of God, and ethics in general. Ethics,
yeah.
Where do ethics end and where do they begin?
Yeah, and again, it comes down to not only a lot of scientific questions relating to that,
right?
But it also has to come down to moral questions as well.
Yeah.
And where do you draw upon those morals from? Do you draw upon those from science and then try to use reason to get to your conclusions? Or do you try to go for a more faith-based approach?
Right.
Now, throughout this movie, they use a lot more reason and deduction-based approaches to arrive at the conclusions that they did. When the elder brother, I think Nikolai
is the younger one. Alexei.
Yeah. When Alexei confronts Watson right before he himself is about to get implanted with his own, corpse program.
Yeah.
Necroware. Like, he's sitting there warning Watson, like, look, you're obviously wanting to open Pandora's box to bring back your friend. But in doing so, you could endanger the whole world for it. That's what he's generally trying to warn of. And even morehand, there's a vision that Watson experiences that may be more on the spiritual side of things too. It's one of the very few spiritual occurrences in the movie. But it's when he's recovering from his wounds and he's in the safe house that he gets the vision from the brothers and everyone else of you screwed up. You screwed up.
Yeah. What I think Itoh does really well is that he shows the character developing in a very natural way. You look at these characters and you say, well, fuck, that's exactly how it is. That's exactly how I would act. That's what I would do. That's what I would think. Because we would say it really the protagonist is Watson. He's the main guy, the head honcho of the movie, and so his journey goes through a very natural cycle, which is he has this idea in his head, and he thinks he's right, and he swears he's right, and it's not because it's impossible. He will eventually reach his goal. It's a matter of more research. The research is not complete.
Yeah.
Is something that he says, even though he's been told by 3 people by now in this movie that he's gonna fuck up. Something truly disastrous is going to happen until it does. And
yeah. And then, of course, he ends up, at the very end of the movie, as his repentance, he sacrifices himself by, doing a corpse upgrade on himself.
And one of the things that I really liked... So, another thing that I like about Itoh is that his dialogues are absolutely superb. They are really smart, very well thought out. Because one of the things that he says, which, I mean, it's not original, it's not truly original, but in the story, one of the things that I don't see very many other characters in anime say is that if I knew this beforehand, if I knew that this is how things would end up, I would have listened. Which is what everybody says. Like, I've said that before. If I only knew if I knew then what I know now, like, I wouldn't have done it.
Exactly. It's always like, the afterthought that comes up. It's just like, oh, if I only hadn't gone over and, put that sugar in that gas tank, I'd still have a really good Ford pickup.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
That's right. Because back then I thought that was a great idea to save money or whatever.
It's like, like somebody come out and was just like, man, like, I don't know why I did that. I shouldn't have told them I love sucking toes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it goes along with this idea of obsession, and being obsessed with this idea that, it will work. It will work. God damn it. It will work. It's just a matter of working harder and harder. Like, for instance, another very good example is, I'm gonna make this girl love me. I'm just gonna make her. Yeah. And it's just a matter of convincing her. I just need to work really hard. I need to let her know who I really am. If she sees me for who I am, she will love me. And then
when it doesn't happen, you're just kind of like, ooh, she's just an SJW.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Watson kind of has that approach throughout most of the movie. It's, it's like, I'm going to restore his soul. Like, I'm just going to get his notes, and I'm going to do it, and, whatever with the British government. I'm just here to get him. Like, he's going in there actually with a very, like, and that's the thing with, it's a very selfish attitude. Mm-hmm. And unlike, Tuon, who carries out her selfishness all the way to the end, Watson actually kind of snaps out of it enough to where he can actually save the day.
Yeah.
Before, again, repenting for what he did. So, yeah. Like I said, there's a lot of, really good stuff that you can take away from Empire of Corpses. Again, feel free to, if there's anything that you guys point out, we always love discussion. So, likes, comments, subscribes are always appreciated when it comes to that stuff.
One thing that I would like to conclude with, which I think ties along really well with the end of this episode, being that our format is voice. Itoh talks about voice being the consequence of a soul. Because if you think about it, speech and language is what truly makes us human, more than any other thing. Because, other animals make noises, but that's not the same thing, and they can communicate with each other. But language is something else.
Yep,
completely.
Yeah, language is a completely different matter, and that's why it's held with importance in a lot of his works thus far. Because the corpses, they can't speak. Therefore, it robs them of their humanity. And, in harmony, the very fact that there's, mainly deafening silence from the powers that be until harmony is activated. And when harmony is activated, there's no grand speech about it. There's no talking about it. It's just pressing a button, and then a program loads up.
And when you look at it, actually, the very last scene is completely sterile. And it's sterile because once the Harmony program is activated, then there is no reason why someone would address another person.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then it does parallel a little bit with the end of Empire of Corpses in that Watson himself is deleting his own humanity, in order to, again, redeem himself for everything that he's done up to that point.
And if you notice that, everything becomes silent.
Yeah, everything becomes silent in the end.
So I think I think that's a good conclusion. And then we'll become silent until next week. So again, comment. You can disagree, agree. You can call me an asshole, whatever. I'm full of shit.
So that's what we should have called it, Empire of Assholes.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, like I said, guys, you can find us on YouTube. Look up the Nevi Double Group. You'll find all of our previous versions of Thoughtful Thursday and NeviCast up on there. And yeah, I mean, this is your boy, Fearless Billy Nwanda, the co-pilot and delivery man. Give your last bit of thoughts.
So one thing that I would like to say, just for those of you who are interested, so the books that are referenced in this episode and the movie are The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Future Eve by Auguste Valliere, Sherlock Holmes, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
Yep. And for a lot of you guys, if you're having problems trying to look up those, but other than like obviously the popular ones, but more the stuff like Future 9 and whatnot, something I would always recommend doing is check over by the Empire of Corpses Wikipedia page. After you've first watched the movie, then listen to us, then go over to the wiki page, and they've actually got a pretty good list of links that link you to all of those characters' works and what they're based on.
Yeah.
In the meantime, folks,
good night, or whatever time it is when you're watching this.
Yes. Have a good one, folks.
Farewell.